talk about the Jan Archetype. Hi, hello, it is me, your least favorite Drag Race content creator, Jer, back for another video. We are talking a very important Drag Race archetype today, and that is the Jan TM. It's probably trademarked by the Jan. There are a lot of archetypes on Drag Race. We've got the theater kid, we've got the ingenue, we've got the up-and-comer, we've got the villains. We have the ones that don't do drag right according to the judges. We have the messy queens, we have the avant-garde queens, and we have the Jan. The universe is full of Jans. And if you love her, you love her. But if you don't like the Jan, she comes off as way too much. And the one person who hates the Jan more than anyone in this world is the infamous Ruth Paul Charles. The Jan has existed across all seasons of Drag Race, and there have been some splinters of the Jan that we've seen throughout the series. But it really wasn't until season 12 that we met the progenitor of the Jan archetype. It's very similar to how in Pokemon we had Gen 1, Jinx and Mr. Mime and Snorlax, but we did not see their pre-evolutions until much later when we got Smoochum and Munchlax. Remember that face crack in season 12 during the Madonna Rusical? When Jan was furious? That was the original crack-in time for the Jan, and it spread across every timeline of Drag Race like Clara and Doctor Who. So what is the Jan? What does she accomplish on Drag Race? And what is that character trope? Because at this point, the Jan is a trope that appears regularly in Drag Race. We don't see the Jan pop up every single season. See specifically season 7 and season 5. Those are very distinctly lacking in the Jan archetypes, but they had so many other television tropes that they didn't need a Jan in that group, or probably couldn't get one to stick. I think sometimes they don't cast a Jan because Rue gets a D20 mental damage every time that a Jan shows up, and she needs a season or two to recover from that damage. There's a really incredible Reddit thread that I found that's called Defining a Jan, and I'm gonna read to you what some of the rules are on that thread. Rule number 1 is safety first. Ella Vidae with her 4 challenge wins can never be British Jan. That's Cheryl Holt. Rule number 2, often sweet, loads of salt with a dash of bitter. The salt is the most important part though. That is why queens like Scarlet Envy are not part of the Janiverse. And rule number 3 is Jans are brimming with tea and will let you know it, but they often lack the necessary CUN, as the only other 3 letters in the repertoire are BFA, which they will weaponize. My proposed rule number 4 is that the Jan archetype is brimming with external chaos. We sometimes see an internal chaos as well, as examples with Violin Jan Thorgy Thor, but we'll get to that. And for me personally, I believe that the Jan is brimming with N. They have so much nerve to go on TV acting the way that they do. And we'll be using this primary thought experiment as a jumping point for the rest of this video. We have Primordial Jan, otherwise known as Chanel, a queen who was safe all of her first season to the point that she barked at the judges to let them know her discontent. She was dripping with talent at every single episode, and yet Rue did not seem to connect with her at all. That is another big component of the Jan archetype. Rue does not like the Jan, but Rue tolerates the Jan because they're great television. Rue also doesn't seem to respond well to high energy characters. If she does, she wants them to be compacted in a very specific way. See queens like Eureka and Ginger Minge, who are just a little bit too much, but it's packaged in a way that Rue can understand it. Their delivery is often in a lane that Rue has driven herself. This very specific Jan energy is akin to theater kids that sing at 3 a.m. at the Denny's all around the sampler platter. And you can absolutely see that theater kid energy present in the various Jan archetypes that we've seen over the seasons. Like Wrestling Jan, otherwise known as Mimi I'm First, Weed Jan, otherwise known as Laganja Estranja, City Jan, Milan, and Let Loose Jan, Lucy LaDuca. Another massive trait about the Jan is psychological warfare on this human being. And this psychological warfare is either engaged by Rue or the producers, sometimes both. I've even made this helpful guide of how the Jans are treated and how they are mistreated by production, root, or both. These are the various identifiable Jan archetypes. One of the very best Jan archetypes that Rue seemed to enjoy torturing the most was Violin Jan of Season 8, Thorgy Thor. Thorgy would routinely be gassed up on the runway during critiques, how she was funny, she was excelling in the challenges, how she did exactly what they wanted to see from her. Then they would give the win to someone else, specifically with Bob. This psychological warfare was endless on Thorgy Thor, and seemed targeted and purposeful, mostly to see how she would react to the situation, which is a known tactic in reality TV, is to pull a string and see how your contestant responds and manipulate their behavior to create a narrative. And then you mold their storyline in the post-production and make them come off however you want to, so that you have a sympathetic root for your winner. Bob is a great drag queen and did not need Thorgy's psychological warfare to propel her to the end. But having that extra story softened Bob's perfection. And so it leads to a stronger winner story. And Thorgy is our audience proxy into seeing a more human side of Bob, which is a great TV tool. Weed Jan is a fantastic representation of being tortured by producers. They put their fingers into situations to stir the pot and see how contestants will react to them. Specifically with not allowing Laganja to have access to weed that would help her relax more in the competition, but many rumors have come out that producers were allowing other competitors to smoke. They knew that Laganja was more unstable without access to something that would medicate her. So they specifically sabotaged her from having that medication to see what chaos would emerge. And lo and behold, that external chaos absolutely came out. This was a targeted attack on Weed Jan to see how she would buckle under pressure. And this was a TV tool to propel Adore forward. It was a proxy of pushing her forward in her story, and to give her a further narrative. We did get something really special in season 13 of RuPaul's Drag Race, and that was a variant of the Jan. And that was when they cast Rosé, sometimes referred to as Pink Jan. Rosé is to Jan what Pau style or Ikorio is to Sensu style or Ikorio. The Pink Jan archetype is similar to regular Jan tenants. However, instead of being cucked by ruined producers, their success is often coddled by them, and their flubs are ignored. Their success is amplified. Rosé had her storyline with Tina Burner, but they never used Rosé as a proxy to get Tina to the end. They barely even followed through on the Rosé and Tina storyline, because by the time that they started actually producing that story, their tension was over. So there was nowhere for Rosé and Tina to go, and Rosé had no tension with anyone else in the group. However, Rosé has every other marker of a Jan. She is dripping in talent and nerve. She's a little bit salty over not getting wins, and she's safe for a very long time in the competition. My suspicion is that we met another Jan archetype, another Ikorio version, so to speak, of the Jan. And that was Code Switch Jan, otherwise known as Q from season 16. She's more of a Galarian version rather than a different mainline version, maybe even Red Jan. So far we only have 2 confirmed Jan archetypes, and that's Original Jan and Pink Jan. And there may be more archetypes to come as we move forward in the franchise. If you believe that you're a Jan archetype and you do drag, you may be entitled to mental torture by RuPaul and producers of RuPaul's Drag Race. You might even go home 6th if you're lucky. And that has been the breakdown of the Jan archetype on RuPaul's Drag Race. I want to make sure that it is very clear that I love Jan. I'm a big fan. I am also a big fan of reality TV, and the lines are very clearly written on the wall of what Jan is to producers and RuPaul. And that entire archetype is merely a storyline in the greater zeitgeist of RuPaul's Drag Race. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the flip. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to click that like button. And if you want to see more, hit subscribe. Goodbye!